Deep within the elven forest, two gorgeous babes were getting absolutely wrecked in a tickle fight against a bunch of revolting, grotesque degenerates. But just as the maid's face was shoved into the dirt, a blade gleamed from behind, slicing through the bastards in one effortless motion. This absurdly overpowered menace was Ark, who had woken up beneath a tree after being reincarnated into this world. Donning the shattered twilight cloak and wielding the wyvern sword, he somehow possessed every single skill from all the classes in the game instead of just one. Though he could obliterate all the trees before him with a wyvern slash, or scorch the entire forest to ashes with Hell's Inferno, the chubby bastard soon realized that spamming these god-tier abilities made him unbearably hungry. Before starvation could claim his life, he unleashed his gate ability to teleport straight to town. But the moment he landed, his dumbass almost knocked himself out by face-planting into the ground. Still, he managed to recover with a quick dimensional move spell, blinking across the world in an instant. Unfortunately, all this reckless magic use left him with a drained water gauge, so he stumbled to a river for a drink. That's when he caught a horrifying glimpse of his reflection, an ugly, grotesque skeleton. It hit him that the townsfolk would slaughter him on sight if they found out what he really was. Even so, he decided to sneak through the alleys in disguise. That's when he spotted her, the most stunning elf babe of his dreams. But to his utter devastation, she took one glance at his sorry ass and walked off like he was invisible. Determined, he scoured the town, tracking her down like a madman until he reached the mercenary guild. There, he demanded to know where she had disappeared, only for the guildmaster to shut him down instantly. If he wanted intel, he had to earn it. The bastard felt bad that such a powerful knight was running around doing low-tier grunt work and assumed Ark was on a noble mission to save his sick child. Little did they know, the only noble thing about this so-called knight was his grand quest to bed the elf with his legendary Excalibur. With no other choice, he slaughtered hordes of boars, completing every dumb quest thrown his way. But before he could cash in, he stumbled upon a group of bandits ambushing soldiers, tearing the clothes off their female captives. As the princess let out a terrified scream for her bust to maid, Ark had a sudden, chilling realization he was the only skeleton in this world, and he wouldn't let another bastard get a bone before him. Just as one of the scumbags was about to claim his prize, Ark blinked behind him and sliced 3 men in half with a single swing. The rest panicked, bolting in fear, but he wasn't about to let them escape. Unleashing his ultimate ability, Wyvern Slash, he incinerated them into non-existence. The rescued lady showered him with gratitude, and as he escorted them to search for the medicinal herbs they needed, he stumbled upon a wounded nine-tailed fox. The poor thing snarled and tried to bite him, but Ark, feeling unusually generous, used his monk magic to heal it. The little furball, now free from pain, began following him around like a loyal pet, so he decided to name it Panta. After journeying deeper into the forest, they finally located the legendary white wisteria tree. But just as Marker rushed forward, an enormous basilisk emerged from the shadows. Before the beast could crush her, Ark teleported her away, barely blocking the poisonous fog it spewed. As he strategized his next move, the monstrous lizard lunged at him with razor-sharp claws, forcing him to parry frantically. It was only a matter of time before it overpowered him. Then, just as its grotesque tongue lashed out to devour him, he blinked out of its reach. His stamina was wearing thin, but then he noticed the creature preparing to unleash its ultimate attack. The second the basilisk activated its petrification spell, Ark countered with his divine shield. With that, the fight had truly begun. Even so, the basilisk kept up its assault, unleashing a dense cloud of toxic mist in an attempt to snuff out Ark's miserable existence. But just as the beast committed to its attack, Ark spotted an opening and unleashed his devastating S-rank ability, cutting it down with a single, earth-shattering blow.
Top-tier class Sacred Knight can use this combat skill! The power of judgment!
Even he was momentarily shocked by the sheer force of his own strike, but something about the creature seemed off. As he cautiously approached the strange ring wrapped around the lizard's body, it crumbled into dust before his eyes. Just then, an enormous boar stomped into view, and Ark, ever the opportunist, decided to slay the beast and present it as a gift to the villagers. Upon his arrival at the village, Marka's mother, the generously endowed Siona, was overjoyed to see her daughter safe and sound. However, Marka had something important to reveal. She had gathered a batch of rare flowers capable of curing her mother's illness. Smiling warmly, Siona pulled her daughter into a hug before turning her attention to Ark, inviting him over with a sultry gaze so she could savor the meat off his bone. After Siona devoured the most satisfying meal of her life, Marka and her sister clung to Ark, calling him their new father and offering him a parting gift before he inevitably disappeared like their last deadbeat dad. Weeks passed, Yet Ark remained fixated on his one true goal, tracking down the elf who had stolen his breath away. His search eventually led him to a dark cavern, rumored to be a hideout for bandits who had kidnapped a group of elves. Inside, he found mountains of gold stacked as if left there just for him. However, the captured elves were nowhere to be found. Deciding to pocket his newfound treasure, he set off toward the town for a well-deserved meal, only to come face to face with his elusive elf, who was now hell-bent on obliterating him. Without hesitation, she lunged at him, her blade cutting through the air with lethal precision. Ark barely managed to dodge her ferocious strikes, but as her cloak fluttered away, he finally laid eyes on the face of the woman who had been haunting his every thought. Attempting to defuse the situation, he pleaded for a chance to explain himself, but she was having none of it, branding him a filthy bandit. Just as she prepared her final, decisive strike, Ponta suddenly emerged, halting her in her tracks. Mrs. Giantplot's expression shifted from hostility to shock as she demanded to know how Ark had managed to befriend a nine-tailed fox. Ark, ever smug, explained that he had healed Ponta when it was injured, earning the beast's trust. Realizing her mistake, the elf reluctantly apologized for misjudging him and revealed that she was on a mission to rescue the elves who had been targeted by slavers. However, they were already gone, and Ark casually mentioned that he had already slaughtered every single bandit. Though she prepared to leave, Ark racked his brain, desperate to turn this into a plot twist where he would be the one twisting her plot. Sorry, what he meant was, he tried to find a way to work alongside her. Unfortunately for him, she rejected his offer outright. Though this encounter left him frustrated with the direction of his life story, Arkansas knew that no self-respecting gamer could pass up the chance to help a gorgeous elf. His determination only grew stronger, and as he spent the nights dreaming of her, the rigid bones in his body refused to let him quit. When morning arrived, he set off for the elven forest, hoping for another chance to cross paths with her. But before he could proceed, Ponta let out a warning enemies were lurking nearby. Moments later, a panicked elf sprinted past him, only to be tackled and captured by a bandit. The scumbag dragged her toward his leader, stabbing her leg and demanding that she beg for mercy. Even when she did, the bastard continued to stab her just to amuse himself. Ark crept closer, scanning the area. He spotted a row of cages packed with terrified elves, their lives hanging by a thread. Just as he prepared to make his move, Mrs. Giant Cannonballs made her explosive entrance, cutting down every enemy in her way. The bandits, realizing they were in deep trouble, swarmed her in an attempt to overwhelm her. But with a single fluid motion, she severed one of their arms before charging forward, her blade carving through every fool who dared stand before her. Panic spread like wildfire as she rampaged across the battlefield, reducing her enemies to mere corpses. Then, the bandit leader stepped forward, raising a hand to halt the carnage. Smirking, he issued a sinister threat. If she continued to resist, he would execute the captured elves one by one. Claiming that he merely wished to inspect the merchandise, he taunted her, the classic setup for a disturbing Sekai plot twist. Before the twisted story could unfold, Ark blinked into existence, sending the leader flying into a nearby tree with bone-crushing force. The remaining bandits fell like insects, their bodies torn apart until not a single one remained. As the dust settled, Mrs. Nuclear Missiles turned her attention to the imprisoned children, wondering how to retrieve the key to free them. Ark, never one to waste time, crushed the lock with his bare hands, liberating the captives. However, among them was a young girl with a cursed collar lashed around her neck, draining her life away with every passing second. She informs Ark that she lacks the power to break the curse, but Ark, ever the overpowered protagonist, channels his magic to purge the dark spell and heal all of her injuries. Hot Elf Girl quickly realizes that this isn't just some ordinary knight. There's something special about him. Her thoughts begin to wander, wondering what else that bone of his. After ensuring the children feel safe, Ark takes the time to play with them, helping them recover from the horrors they just endured. Meanwhile, Mrs. Giant Blaster properly introduces herself as Ariane. Just as Ark finally starts enjoying some well-deserved alone time with her, an urgent messenger bird swoops in, warning Ariane of an attack on the elf stronghold. Without hesitation, she turns to Ark, asking if she can enlist his help. Though she has never trusted a human in her entire life, after witnessing his heroics, she decides to take a gamble and place her faith in him. Teleporting her near the lethal river, Ark catches Ariane off guard as she realizes that he possesses the forbidden ability of long-range teleportation. What's even more shocking is that he casts the spell effortlessly, without even speaking an incantation. By the time they reach the bridge, Ark warps them into a secluded alley, where Ariane informs him that they'll be meeting her lifelong friend. Ark, of course, immediately assumes that means another beautiful elf girl is about to enter his life. However, when he turns around, his dreams are utterly shattered. Standing before him is nothing more than a grotesque Russian idiot. With no other options, they prepare to infiltrate the building. Spotting an open window as their best entry point, Ariane ensures the rooftop is clear before leading the way inside. As they explore the dimly lit structure, they quickly notice something unusual. Several mercenaries have already been slain. Among the corpses, a powerful spirit beast lingers, and after a brief misunderstanding, Ariane apologizes for her hasty attack. Before parting ways, the spirit creature provides Ark with a detailed map of the underground chambers, revealing the locations of several imprisoned elves. However, Ark is left thoroughly confused. What mission? As far as he's concerned, his only goal now is finding that elusive hot cat ninja girl.
The kunai were just released.
Later, as Ark presents Ariane and Danka with the layout of the prison cells, Ariane grows suspicious, wondering how he managed to obtain such classified intelligence. Before Ark can fabricate a convincing lie to distract her unappealing face, a group of bandits barges into the room.
Who are you people?
Unfortunately for them, Ariane wastes no time incinerating the entire lot with a single burst of magic, instantly reducing the pathetic scumbags to ashes. Without hesitation, she vows to obliterate anyone foolish enough to stand in her way. A short while later, they locate the group of elves trapped within their iron-barred cells. With nothing but raw strength, Ark pries the bars apart, granting the girls their long-awaited freedom. Ensuring their safety, he teleports them outside, but soon notices a cursed seal wrapped around their necks. Without missing a beat, he activates his uncurse magic, instantly removing the affliction. Danka, witnessing this rare ability, realizes that only the esteemed archdukes are supposed to be capable of such a feat. However, he assures Ark that he will take responsibility for the elves while they proceed with their infiltration of the mansion. Seizing the opportunity, Ark wraps his arms around Ariane and warps them toward their next target, the final two elves. Meanwhile, somewhere in the distance, the cat ninja girl watches, quietly hoping that fate will bring them together again someday. Deep inside the Lord's manor, two elves remain bound to a bed, their fate hanging by a thread as they teeter on the edge of a sickening anicapped plot twist. The repulsive old man looming over them smears a suspicious white cream across the elf's stomach, eliciting some rather concerning sounds from her. Outside the estate, Ark zips through the air, teleporting toward the manor's rooftop, ready to put an end to whatever twisted scene is unfolding inside. Ark swiftly eliminates the guards stationed on the rooftop, making quick work of their defenses. Meanwhile, the rest of the soldiers within the manor scramble to locate him, but Ark masterfully blends into the shadows, avoiding unnecessary bloodshed. Inside, a nervous man knocks on the owner's door, urgently warning him of an impending invasion by those who wish to see his downfall. Before he can utter another word, Ark and Ariane smash through the door, making their intentions clear. They have come to free the elves and end this twisted operation. Without hesitation, they obliterate the owner's ability to create any more disgusting plots, ensuring the captives are safe. As Ark begins interrogating the sleazy slave dealer, he notices an inconspicuous section of the wall,
A hidden room.
suspecting a hidden chamber. Meanwhile, Ariane delivers the Lord the exact kind of treatment he had planned for his victims, making sure he regrets every life decision up to this point. Simultaneously, the two rescued elves prepare to unleash a world of suffering upon him. But before they can exact their 1,000 years of pain, a squad of soldiers bursts into the room to intervene. However, their efforts prove utterly futile, as Ariane casts her ultimate spell, incinerating them all in an instant. As the flames consume their pathetic existence, Ark takes advantage of the chaos, looting the Lord's stash of gold without an ounce of shame. When Ariane questions his actions, the Topchi smoothly explains that the funds would have been used to rebuild the vile slave trade, so naturally, he's confiscating it all to ensure their operations never recover. Impressed by his so-called noble reasoning, Ariane accepts his explanation without hesitation, completely falling for the kind of deception that Andrew Tate himself would applaud. With that, Ark secures enough wealth to finally escape the life of a broke peasant and afford himself a real bug hattie, rather than remaining a filthy brookie. Now rolling in riches, Ariane extends an invitation, asking if he'd spend a night in her elven village. While this is the exact scenario that every unwashed, socially inept loser would kill to experience, before he can be her daddy, he must first meet her father. However, Ark immediately hesitates, realizing that revealing his true identity could lead to a sword through his chest. When Ariane swears that she will not turn against him, he contemplates whether he can truly take this path, ultimately deciding to remove his mask. Upon seeing his cursed appearance, she bluntly asks how he managed to become so hideous. Keeping his Ice-Sky origins a secret, Ark vaguely explains that he simply woke up one day in this form. However, Ariane, having already been captivated by the sheer size of his bone structure, decides to accept him regardless. She reassures him that there may be a way to lift his curse, providing him with a sliver of hope. A few days later, As they near the elven village, Ark, in his usual dumbassery, attempts to teleport ahead, but instead falls straight into a hole, one so massive, it could rival even Ariane's proportions. Despite the setback, they manage to locate a clean water source to refill their bottles, and after skillfully catching a fish, they spend the night preparing their meal. However, as they settle down, Ariane's stomach lets out an earth-shaking growl, signaling a hunger too great for a single fish to satisfy, given the sheer weight she carries on her chest. Understanding the situation, Ark sets off to hunt a boar to ensure she gets a proper meal. While he is away, Ariane notices Ponta curled up and sleeping. Though she desperately wants to pet the little creature, she exercises restraint, allowing it to rest peacefully. However, the mischievous furball wakes up anyway, and when Ark finally returns with his fresh catch, he is greeted by the sight of Ariane shamelessly rubbing Ponta against her massive chest. Though Ark does his best to suppress the cringe, deep down, he can't help but wish that he were in Ponta's place, experiencing the softness firsthand. The next morning, after navigating through the dense forest, they finally arrive at the gates of the elven village. As Ariane announces their presence, the gates immediately open in response. Inside, they are greeted by the village elder, who introduces himself as Dylan and reveals that Ariane is, in fact, his daughter. Meanwhile, her mother, Glennis, decides to pull the ultimate cougar move, lying about her age in an attempt to seduce Ark, hoping to orchestrate an intimate arrangement involving all three of them. Unfortunately for her, Ariane isn't into older women, and she silently rejects her mother's desperate advances. As the awkward tension fades, Dylan turns his attention back to Ark, demanding to know why they launched an attack on Lord Triton's mansion in the first place. Dylan feared their reckless actions might ignite a war and questioned why they couldn't simply leave without turning the place into a blazing inferno. However, Ark took the time to break everything down, explaining their reasons in full detail. By the time he finished, Dylan reconsidered his stance and determined that they weren't entirely in the wrong. However, he informed them that he still needed to present everything to the other elders. Seeing the weight of the situation, Ariane offered to accompany him for support, and Dylan agreed, telling her they would depart in the morning. The next day, when Ark finally woke up, Glennis casually mentioned that Dylan and Ariane had already left. Shrugging it off, Ark wandered through the city until Glennis suddenly suggested they have a sparring match. By the time evening rolled around, they found themselves deep in the forest, where she confidently announced her intent to test his longsword, purely in a combat sense, of course. Her true goal was to determine whether he possessed the strength to protect her daughter. Without warning, she lunged at him, feigning an attack aimed at his head before flashing behind him and sweeping his legs out from under him in an instant. As she watched him hit the ground like a sack of disappointment, she scoffed at his sluggish movements, bluntly informing him that even a newborn would have reacted faster than his pathetic excuse of a body. With zero sympathy, she instructed him to brace himself for her next strike. Realizing that this was the first time he was facing someone vastly superior to him, Ark shifted his focus to studying her movements. However, before he could even process her next step, she blurred out of sight and slammed him into the dirt yet again. This continued relentlessly as she pounded him over and over. By the time the sun began to set, Ark was utterly drained, reduced to little more than a bruised mess lying face down in the grass. Desperate to turn the tide, he attempted a feint, pretending to strike so he could teleport behind her for a surprise attack. But before he could land a single hit, Glennis retaliated with a rapid barrage of 100 strikes, utterly demolishing him and sending him crashing to the ground once more. As he lay there, aching and defeated, he couldn't help but feel like he had personally let Andrew Tate down by losing to a woman in the one place he should have had the upper hand, inside the home. Seeking to wash away both his shame and his wounds, Ark decided to soak in a hot bath. As he sat in the water, he couldn't stop his mind from drifting, wondering if Ariane would somehow join him in the showers. Meanwhile, in the living room, Ariane found herself contemplating whether Ark had managed to catch a good look at her plot-heavy proportions. Just then, Dylan reappeared, cutting through the awkward silence. He informed Ark that the elders had come to a decision. They had chosen to hire him, entrusting him with the mission of investigating the slave contract and, more importantly, freeing the remaining captive elves. However, since they were completely broke and had no way to pay him, Ariane figured there was no way Ark would lower himself to work for these brokies. Realizing this, Dylan knew he had to offer something of value, so he revealed the location of the sacred spring, a legendary source of healing water. He explained that this spring was rumored to possess miraculous restorative properties, powerful enough to even break Ark's skeletal curse. Seeing this as a potential answer to all his problems, Ark grew eager to find it, but he had no idea where to start. Dylan then told him that the spring was located near the Lord Crown, a rare dragon tree that served as the home of the Dragon Lord. This massive tree was the key to reaching the spring, but Ariane warned him that the dragon would annihilate anyone foolish enough to disturb the spirits within. However, she was confident they could earn permission to enter, believing that with the right approach, their success was guaranteed. She also informed Ark that she would be accompanying him on this journey, causing Ark to immediately accept without hesitation, wondering if she would finally warm his cold, bony soul. Yet later that night, as he sat alone in his room, Ark began to question whether his skeletal form was truly a curse at all, given that he had simply taken on the form of his game avatar. Suddenly, it dawned on him, his uncursed spell had the power to remove any curse. Wasting no time, he decided to test it on himself. But the moment he cast the spell, his flesh instantly vanished, leaving him as nothing but bones once more. Frustrated, he repeated the spell again, only for his newly restored flesh to immediately disintegrate. Realizing that this method wasn't going to cut it, he had no choice but to continue searching for another way. By morning, they set out on their next journey, traveling deep into the forest in hopes of tracking down the remaining elves involved in the trafficking contract. At the same time, Ark felt oddly relieved to have confirmed that his skeletal state was indeed the result of a curse. However, he still couldn't shake the thought of whether the sacred spring could permanently restore his body. That night, they stopped at an inn for dinner, where Ariane suggested cutting through the forest to reach their destination faster. Before Ark could respond, the innkeeper approached them, warning that the forest was far too dangerous. She revealed that it had been overrun by haunted wolves, who had already made meals out of a few unlucky travelers. Despite the chilling warning, the moment the innkeeper left, Ariane immediately insisted that they continue with their original plan. The next morning, they resumed their journey through the dense woods. Along the way, Ariane mentioned that she intended to collect the wolves' tails as a gift for her sister. She had discovered that their fur could be crafted into a beautiful veil, which she believed would make the perfect present. Just as she finished explaining, the wolves suddenly emerged from the bushes. Ark swiftly cut down one of the beasts, but to his shock, it disappeared before his eyes, revealing that it had been nothing more than an illusion. As Ariane slashed through the phantom creatures, Ark narrowly dodged an attack from one of them, only for another to sink its teeth deep into his armor. The wolves possessed the ability to conjure multiple illusions to confuse and distract their prey. As more wolves lunged at him, he swiftly slashed through their deceptive forms. The last wolf clamped down on his armor, refusing to let go. As more wolves sprinted toward Ariane, she summoned a blaze of fire, incinerating one instantly. But when another attempted to flank her using multiple clones, she called forth jagged earth spikes, skewering them all at once. Watching her in action, Ark couldn't help but admire her skill. As he tossed aside the wolves in his path, he realized there was much he could learn from her. However, he knew that as long as the pack leader remained, the wolves wouldn't truly be defeated. Spotting the leader standing atop a nearby cliff, Ark teleported in an instant, striking at the beast, only for it to evade his attack effortlessly. That was when he noticed a mystical ring clamped around its ankle, and it immediately struck a chord in his memory. He had seen the same kind of ring on another creature before. Teleporting again, he aimed for another strike, but the wolf flashed behind him, poised to finish him off. Before it could, Ark blasted it with a burst of fire and swiftly severed the ring with his blade. At that moment, the wolf let out a deafening roar as clarity returned to its eyes, signaling the rest of the pack to retreat. As Ariane rejoined him, they watched the ring crumble into nothingness, both wondering who could have created such an item. But Ariane, unfazed, suddenly remembered her mission. She still needed wolf fur. Wasting no time, she got straight to work. Meanwhile, far across the forest, a princess was traveling by carriage, lost in troubling thoughts. She worried that her brothers might have been involved in the elf slave trade, fearing their greed would ignite a war between their kingdom and the elves. Just then, the carriage jolted violently as it struck something, followed by the chilling screams of her guards under attack. At that exact moment, Panda sensed the incoming danger and dashed toward the scene. As the carriage slammed into a tree, the princess's attendant immediately drew her sword. But before she could react, the carriage door swung open, and in one swift motion, a man cut her down where she stood. Horrified, the princess rushed forward to aid her, only to be struck down as well, sent straight into the abyss. While the attackers cheered at their supposed victory, Panta lunged at one of the soldiers. However, the brute effortlessly caught the tiny creature, prompting his commander to order him to get rid of it. Before he could comply, Ark materialized beside him, effortlessly snapping his arm in one swift motion. But as he turned his attention to check on the princess, the other men unleashed a barrage of fireballs at him. Yet, their attacks left him completely unscathed. Just then, the haunted wolves emerged from the depths of the forest, sinking their fangs into the attackers. As Ark locked eyes with the pack leader, he drew his sword and swiftly decimated the remaining men. Once the wolves retreated into the darkness, Ark cast a regeneration spell, sealing the princess's wounds. Seeing the effect, he decided to extend the same spell to the fallen attendant, then continued reviving the other slain soldiers. By the time the princess regained consciousness, her attendant gasped in disbelief, insisting that they must have been resurrected by a divine miracle. The princess, overwhelmed, declared that their salvation must have come from God himself. As her soldiers gathered around her, she passionately proclaimed that this was a sign they were under divine protection, and no matter what, they had to press forward with their journey. Meanwhile, Ark watched the scene unfold from behind a bush, conflicted about whether using his healing magic had been a mistake. But in the end, he brushed the thought aside and set off to reunite with Ariane, only to find that she had already finished collecting all the wolf fur. A few days later, as they finally arrived at the city, an ugly brute rudely bumped into Ariane. But as the fool thought he could start a fight and come back later to extort money, the girl wasted no time poking his eyes. When the rest of his gang saw this, they decided to jump her all at once. However, she effortlessly flung them away like ragdolls, making Ark realize that she was far stronger than she appeared. Just then, the girl finally noticed their presence and turned to ask whether their mission to rescue the elves had been a success. But as those words left her lips, Ark suddenly realized who she was. She was the ninja he had encountered before. As if confirming his thoughts, she pulled down her mask to reveal her face. However, as Ari started questioning the stranger's identity, Ark decided to spill the truth. She was the one who had given him the slave contracts. The girl then properly introduced herself as Chiyomi, revealing that she was one of the 6 elite ninjas of the Genshin clan. Without wasting time, she suggested they move somewhere quieter. Once inside an inn, Chiyomi curiously asked why Ark had called her a ninja. He simply replied that he had met a ninja once. Hearing this, Chiyomi's eyes widened. If that were true, then Ark must be from the same realm as their great founder. The thought struck Ark like a brick to the face. When Ari inquired why Chiyomi had brought them aside, she revealed that she needed their help to rescue her captured clansmen. In exchange, she offered to reveal the locations of the remaining enslaved elves. However, Ari reminded her that Ark had already been hired to track down the elves. Ark turned to see if Ari was truly willing to lend a hand, and after a moment's thought, she agreed. As they headed toward the slave market, Ari took the opportunity to ask about the great founder. Chiyomi explained that he was a human who had trained their people when they were once enslaved in the Empire. Under his guidance, they became the Genshin clan. As Ark listened, he realized that the great founder must have been someone truly extraordinary to have forged such a legacy. The thought crossed his mind, could he ever become a legend like that? Then he laughed bitterly, knowing full well that he was too much of a loser to ever achieve anything like that. When they arrived at the slave market, Chiyomi revealed their attack strategy. Meanwhile, inside the market, the guards were preoccupied, discussing how much money they'd rake in from selling off their captives. They were eager to hit their quota so they could ship the slaves off to another country. Outside, Chiyomi explained that reinforcements would surely come once the market was attacked. To create a distraction, she suggested they storm the front gates but voiced her concern about whether they'd be able to escape in time. Ark, however, dismissed those worries and reassured her that they would fight until the end. He even casually revealed that he could teleport away once their mission was complete. Hearing this, Chiyomi's excitement flared. She immediately suspected that Ark was some kind of space-time ninjutsu master, and if that were true, then they could save all her captured comrades with his teleportation magic. With that thought in mind, she left to inform the rest of her allies, telling them that the attack would commence at night. In an instant, she leaped into the trees and disappeared from sight. Ark turned to Ari and suggested they make their own preparations. However, his idea of preparation was nothing more than engaging in yet another tragic battle against food. As Ari offered him some meat, telling him it was from a dragonfly they had encountered a few days prior. Surprisingly, Ark found it delicious. After their meal, Ark decided to put on a grotesque mask in the forest, but Ari immediately questioned whether he was actively trying to make his already terrifying face even worse. She bluntly told him that he now looked more horrifying than a circus reject, and even Panta appeared traumatized at the mere sight of his revolting new look. Just then, Chiyomi returned with a companion, introducing him as Gomen. The moment Gomen approached Ark, it looked as if he was ready to knock Ark's teeth out. Without hesitation, the two suddenly locked hands and started grappling in a fierce contest of strength. Neither one could overpower the other, so they leaped back, only to rush at each other again, this time embracing in a dramatic, brotherly hug. The girls, watching in absolute disbelief, couldn't tell if these two had gone completely insane. However, before they could say anything, the city bell rang out, signaling that the battle was about to begin. As they prepared for the attack, Chiyomi assigned Ark and Gomen to assault the front gate of the capital. As soon as they began their approach, the knights stationed at the gate immediately sensed danger and unsheathed their weapons. Wasting no time, Gomen summoned the earth beneath him, molding it into massive horns before charging straight for the gate. In one powerful blow, he smashed through the entrance with ease. The commotion drew the attention of the soldiers within, who immediately rushed forward to protect the capital. But Ark wasted no time in obliterating them, launching them crashing into the walls in an instant. Meanwhile, Gomen activated his ability, turning his entire body into solid steel. Hoping to draw out even more reinforcements, Ark launched a barrage of rock projectiles, reducing the incoming enemies to mere dust. Those who survived the assault were gripped with terror, but before they could retreat,
To stone! Rock spear strike!
Gomen conjured a massive rock spear from the ground, sending the cowards fleeing for their lives. Impressed by Gomen's skills, Ark decided it was his turn to show off, so he summoned Rock Fong from the earth obliterating the men and even leveling the entire capital before being buried beneath the wreckage. Meanwhile, Chiyomi and Ari had climbed over the wall, and as they saw that enough soldiers had gathered at the gate, they hurried toward the main building. At that moment, Chiyomi swiftly unlocked the door, and they noticed that the guards were rushing toward the front gate, allowing them to sprint down the hallway undetected. However, Panta suddenly let out a low growl, alerting them to the presence of a few soldiers who had spotted them. As the enemies charged forward, Chiyomi unleashed Liquid Wolf. And as the water rose like a spiraling tornado, the wolves tore through the men instantly. Seeing her abilities in action, Ari recognized it as ninjutsu and thought Chiyomi was impressive. But before she could say anything, more guards came storming in, prompting Ari to summon flames from her sword
Consume all to ash and dust! Ah!
and incinerate them on the spot. Before long, they reached the underground cells, and as Chiyomi flung open one of the doors, she immediately freed the captives, ordering them to help release the others. At the same time, more soldiers came charging toward them, but Ari put an end to them with a single, swift strike. Meanwhile, outside, Ark eventually clawed his way out from under the rubble, and as Gomen also emerged, Ark realized that the man had managed to survive by turning his body into solid steel. Looking around, Ark saw that all the enemies had already been eliminated. Just as he was about to suggest that they search for the girls, Ari and Chiyomi appeared before them, announcing that they had already freed the slaves. However, there was one more building they suspected was holding additional captives, so they immediately set off toward it. As they approached, a guard lunged at Ari, but she swiftly cut him down before slicing through another. While Chiyomi summoned her Liquid Wolf, wiping out the remaining enemies. When they reached another underground chamber, Chiyomi began freeing the captives, but upon reaching the final cell, she discovered that every single prisoner inside was already dead. Outside, Gomen prepared for battle once more, hardening his body into steel as fresh reinforcements arrived at the gate. Meanwhile, inside the building, they sensed the approaching soldiers, so Ark quickly began teleporting the surviving captives outside, ensuring their escape. Back at the front gate, the reinforcements soon realized they had made a grave mistake. No matter how much they attacked, they couldn't put a scratch on Gomen. Just then, Ark teleported to his side, and as the enemies watched the two stand together, they knew they were completely doomed.
Wipe this disgusting place off the map!
Without hesitation, Ark summoned rock fangs from the earth, while Gomen supported him with his own rock spears, utterly obliterating the battlefield and tearing up the ground beneath them. At the sheer magnitude of destruction, Chiyomi briefly questioned whether they would even make it out alive. But in the next instant, Ark suddenly teleported before them, revealing that he had saved all the bodies to send their souls to Nirvana. Ari summoned flames to burn the remains, and as the spirits rose toward the heavens, Chiyomi swore to grow stronger so that she could protect those who had survived. A few hours later, with all the freed slaves safely returned to their homes, Chiyomi and Gomen reunited with Ark and Ari. However, the moment Gomen locked eyes with Ark, the two once again locked hands in an absurd display of dominance. Their ridiculous contest of strength caused the ground beneath them to cave in, forming a massive pit. But with neither able to gain the upper hand, they simply gave up and embraced like long-lost brothers yet again. Ari, however, was far less amused and outright called them a pair of complete morons. The following day, as they sailed through the capital, Chiyomi thanked them for their help and finally decided to reveal what she had promised. Meanwhile, Princess Uriana had arrived in another city, where she was relieved to find her sister alive and well. However, when her sister revealed that their brother had been behind the assassination attempt, Uriana couldn't help but wonder how she had learned such information. Upon entering the castle, her sister explained that their older brother, Dekarza, had been found in possession of Uriana's necklace and had even confessed to the crime before he was ultimately slain. However, Uriana suspected this was a scheme against him and quickly realized that her second brother's faction could have orchestrated the entire plot. So when her sister suggested they announce her survival to the world, Uriana firmly refused. Instead, she decided to keep her existence a secret, realizing that she could use this opportunity to form an alliance with the Elf clan. If she played her cards right, she might even claim the throne before her brother even knew what was happening. Deep in the forest, as Ark and Ari continued their journey, Ark recalled that Chiyomi had mentioned the captured elves were being held in the Holy Ravlin Empire. However, he soon noticed that Ari had grown noticeably uneasy ever since she heard that name. He pondered just how perilous the city might be but remained confident that they would ultimately succeed in locating the elves. Several days later, upon reaching a barren wasteland, they spotted a flock of wyverns circling in the sky. While Ark was thrilled to witness them for the first time,
Knew it! Those are living, screeching wyverns!
Ari quickly pointed out that her whispering fowl was too frightened to take flight. This unfortunate turn of events meant they wouldn't be able to communicate with Danka until they had safely passed through the wasteland. He launched himself off the mountainside, landing with both feet planted firmly into the cracked earth below. Fearing that the idiot was about to pull some reckless stunt, Ari attempted to ask him what exactly he was planning. However, before she could get an answer, Ark had already begun casting a lightning spell, causing the once clear skies to darken with ominous storm clouds. The moment he activated Lightning Damper, an enormous electrical surge erupted, sending powerful bolts crashing down upon the wyverns. Unfortunately, Ari and Panta were also caught in the crossfire, receiving the full, unintended wrath of his spell. As the wyverns finally scattered and took flight elsewhere, Ark teleported back to the top of the mountains, only to be met with a grim sight. Ari and the animals were completely scorched, their singed forms twitching slightly in the aftermath of his stupidity. Meanwhile, from the shadows of a nearby cliff, an unfamiliar figure observed the entire spectacle. Watching the disaster unfold, he immediately came to one irrefutable conclusion. Ark was, without a doubt, the most utterly useless, repugnant, and brainless buffoon he had ever laid eyes on. Later that evening, as they rested inside an inn, Ari grumbled that her ears were still buzzing from the shock. Ark apologized for his blunder, but she chose to ignore it and instead unfolded her map, pointing out the quickest path to the capital. She explained that they needed to cross the Expedal River, but Ark noticed that there was barely any information about the border town near it. Just then, he saw the familiar look of concern on Ari's face, making him suspect she was hesitant about entering the Empire. She admitted that elves could be legally captured there and confessed that even setting foot in a town near the border made her uneasy. Before Ark could respond, the man from earlier appeared before them, claiming he had witnessed Ark's incredible magic back in the desert. Introducing himself as Karsi, he barely got his name out before Ari slammed a jar over his head. Realizing he was an elf, she questioned whether he had completely lost his mind for exposing his ears in a town full of humans. But instead of panicking, the innkeeper casually asked Karsi if he wanted his usual order. When he confirmed, his human friends waved him over to their table. Ari watched the scene unfold in disbelief, but before she could say anything, Karsi shot her a glare and ordered her to take her filthy hands off his jacket. He explained that he had been living in the town for years. Ari struggled to understand how that was even possible, but Karsi insisted that a world where humans and elves peacefully coexisted wasn't just a dream. Ari scoffed, calling it absurd and reminding him of everything humans had done to their kind. But Karsi wasn't interested in debating. He simply asked why she was traveling with a human and an incredibly rare spirit creature. That silenced her. Flustered, she muttered that Ark was a special case. Ark jumped in and bluntly asked Karsi what he actually wanted from them. Getting straight to the point, Karsi began explaining that he earned a living by studying monster biology, though he admitted he had hit a snag with some new specimens. Not interested in playing errand runners, Ari bluntly stated that they had more important matters to handle, but Karsi countered by offering them a map of the Empire as compensation. Knowing full well that they needed it for their journey, he even sweetened the deal by tossing in a copy of his monster research book as a bonus. The mere thought of obtaining all that knowledge lit a fire in Ark's eyes. Ari made the executive decision to take the job. Karsi informed them that they would be setting out in the morning and promptly took his leave. Ari couldn't shake the unease of him living among humans. Later that night, Ark handed the innkeeper a handful of gold coins to cover their stay, even telling her to keep the change in exchange for letting him take his food upstairs. Amused, the innkeeper decided to throw in an entire barrel of premium grape juice as a parting gift. Once they returned to the room, Ari remained deep in thought, still grappling with the idea of elves and humans peacefully coexisting. But Ark, tired of her overthinking, muttered that his bones felt much better when her mouth was occupied with drinking rather than talking. Ari, unimpressed, asked if she could have some of his juice. She hesitated for a moment, feeling as though she might lose control, but quickly dismissed the thought and reminded Ark that she wasn't a child. Without another word, she tilted the glass back and chugged it down, only for her ears to twitch at the overwhelming sensation. Still, she deemed herself a drinking champion and, without hesitation, poured herself another glass of Ark's drink. Her ears twitched again as the sweetness hit her full force, but this time, Ark joined in, taking a glass for himself. The moment the liquid touched his tongue, he felt himself sinking into a sea of sugary bliss. Just then, her words sent Ark over the edge, and she boldly requested to feel the longest bone in his body. Confused as to why she was so interested in his femur, Ark awkwardly suggested she just go to bed, but she scoffed, calling him a clueless bonehead before insisting she wanted to get up close and personal with his skeleton. Before long, the innkeeper began feeling the tremors from their intense plot development, and soon enough, the entire town was shaking from how brutally Ari was slamming Ark's bones against the floor. The next morning, Ari woke up groggy, trying to recall what exactly had transpired the previous night. But the moment her eyes landed on Ark's repulsive skeleton sprawled across the room, she nearly blasted him to oblivion, perhaps even harder than she had blown him away just hours earlier. A few hours later, when they stepped outside, they found Karsi waiting for them. He invited them to join him in the lead wagon, while his hideous companion trailed behind.
Lady Arion?
As their journey took them across the desert, Ark quickly noticed that Ari was suffering from a brutal hangover. The wagon's jostling made her nausea worse, and the foul stench wafting from the back of the cart had her on the verge of puking. When Ark inquired about the source of the rancid smell, Carsey nonchalantly revealed that the cargo consisted of goblin carcasses, which they planned to use as bait for the sandworm. Meanwhile, Carsey's grotesque friend offered Ark some tea for Ari's hangover, but his unsettling grin sent shivers down her spine. Carsey assured her that Evans wasn't as awful as he looked, though that statement did little to put her at ease. Regardless, Ark handed her the tea, and after taking a sip, she admitted it actually wasn't half bad. At the same time, Ark pressed Carsey for details about the sandworm. Carsey explained that the creature was about 5 meters long, lived underground, and scavenged for corpses at dusk. While it had a natural weakness to fire, he warned them against using flames, noting that sandworms were typically drawn to large flocks of wyverns. Ark suspected the creature must have been lurking nearby during their time in the wasteland, but Carsey stated that his real goal was to study the beast in hopes of preventing future casualties. Just then, Ari realized that Ugly Evans had mysteriously vanished, along with the cart. Before she could warn Carsey, the ground erupted, and an enormous worm burst forth. The sandworm they had come to capture had finally appeared, but Ark instantly noticed that it was 5 times larger than what Carsey had described. As soon as Ari spotted Evans in danger, she dashed toward the beast and unleashed a powerful fire spell, engulfing it in flames. However, to her shock, the attack barely left a scratch. Before she could process why fire had no effect, the creature lunged at her, nearly swallowing her whole. Luckily, Ark intercepted it with a single hand. Ordering her to fall back, Ark gave her a chance to retreat with the others. Once the area was clear, he lifted the monstrous sandworm clean off the ground and drove it into the earth with a devastating slam, shattering the cursed ring that had been controlling it. His overwhelming strength left everyone dumbfounded, but Ark merely smirked and asked if they wanted to see more. After returning to town, Carsey handed over the promised map and book, expressing his gratitude for their assistance. Ark noticed that Ari had grown unusually quiet. Finally, she broke her silence, asking Carsey why he had chosen to live among humans. He simply smiled, admitting that he had grown to love them. Though he once despised them back in the elf village, his perspective had completely changed after leaving. He believed that, given enough time, humans and elves would inevitably start living together in harmony. To support his point, he revealed that even the Lord of Lambert had taken an elf as his wife. The revelation sent Ari into a fit of disbelief. Immediately, she demanded to know if the marriage had been forced, but Carsey clarified that the Lord had actually rescued the elf from being sold into slavery, and the two had eventually fallen in love. Ever since then, the kingdom had begun exploring ways to improve relations between humans and elves. A short while later, Ark and Ari departed from town, with Ari still mulling over the possibility of a future where elves and humans could coexist peacefully. Meanwhile, deep within the Empire, a man confronted a revolting creep about the sudden disappearances of people from the city. The creep, however, casually admitted that he had only been abducting slaves to serve as food for his pets. As he spoke, he shamelessly groped 2 frightened women, claiming that he was simply carrying out the job he had been hired to do by the Emperor himself. Realizing that reasoning with him was pointless, the man decided to shift topics and ask about their planned attack. Hoping to impress his visitor, the creep, revealing himself to be Fumba, led him toward a pit. Without hesitation, he shoved one of the women inside. Her terrified scream echoed through the air, while the remaining woman cried out in horror. Even the man was visibly disturbed by the gruesome sight. However, Fumba, beaming with pride, simply hoped his beasts would savor their meal. At the same time, Ark and Ari finally arrived at the border town of Kasek, marking their entrance into the Holy Ravlin Empire. They had previously heard rumors that kidnapped elves were frequently brought to this very town. As they observed the patrolling soldiers, Ari quickly noted that the entire city was locked down tight. Ark suspected that their mere presence alone would attract unwanted attention, making their investigation much more difficult. Agreeing with his assessment, Ari suggested they take a slow and cautious approach, recommending that they split up and regroup at the same spot before sunset. Throughout the day, they scoured the city, gathering as much information as they could about the missing elves. As evening approached, Ark stopped by to buy some food for Panta. While the fox happily ate, Ark took the opportunity to review the details he had gathered. Earlier in the day, he had learned that horrifying screams had been echoing from a fortress located on the eastern side of the city, and that monsters had been spotted at the Empire's territorial borders. On top of that, reports of missing townspeople were becoming increasingly frequent. Despite his efforts, Ark was frustrated to find that he had made no progress in uncovering the whereabouts of the kidnapped elves. It was proving to be a far more difficult task than he had anticipated. Just then, he recalled that it was time to meet up with Ari. However, before he could leave, a sudden scream caught his attention. Turning toward the commotion, he saw a young girl being roughly shoved into a stack of barrels. The girl attempted to stand her ground, telling them to back off, but another degenerate grabbed her arm and attempted to drag her away. At that moment, Ark yanked the guy's arm backward, reprimanding him to act like a gentleman and to always wash his disgusting hands. Immediately, the other two thugs lunged at him. Without breaking a sweat, Ark delivered a head flick so powerful that it sent them crashing straight into the wall. Feeling quite proud of himself for dishing out some well-earned justice, he barely had time to react before the girl threw herself into his arms. Concerned, Ark asked if she was hurt, but instead of answering, she clung to him and started showering him with gratitude for saving her. However, just as this touching moment was unfolding, Ari suddenly appeared in the alleyway, announcing that she had found a lead. Narrowing her eyes in jealousy, she immediately demanded to know who the desperate street rat was. Ark quickly explained the situation, but Ari seemed less interested in the details. Still, she decided to examine the girl for any injuries, only to realize that she didn't even have a single scratch on her. With a sharp glare, Ari bluntly ordered the flat-ass nobody to get lost, her fiery gaze nearly setting the poor girl ablaze on the spot. Without hesitation, the girl bolted for her life. Watching her flee, Ark came to a stunning realization. Later that night, Ark apologized for missing their planned meetup, but when he noticed Ari's expression was twisted with irritation, he asked if she was mad. Immediately, she shrieked that she wasn't, her tone making it obvious that she absolutely was. Meanwhile, the three useless goons limped their way into the East Side Fortress, only to be met with Fumba's disappointment. Seeing that they had returned empty-handed, he watched in amusement as they started pointing fingers and blaming each other for their failure. But to Fumba, it didn't matter. He figured they were all equally valuable as dinner. With a casual wave of his hand, he ordered his monstrous pet to devour them before making his exit. Before long, he reached the pit, his senses sharpening as he detected the chilling presence lurking within the darkness. He knew the beast needed another meal soon. At the same time, Ark and Ari were positioned outside the fortress, analyzing the situation. Ari revealed that a group of elves had been brought here 4 months ago, but Ark grimly speculated that they could all be dead by now. Even so, Ari was determined to find out for herself. Without hesitation, she launched herself toward the fortress, ready to take the risk. As she teleported ahead, Ark asked how she had managed to obtain such valuable intel, but Ari only scoffed, making it clear that, unlike him, she wasn't some perverted idiot who only cared about saving random women. Her words made Ark realize that Ari had been pissed off the entire time, not because of the mission, but because he had saved that girl. He tried pressing her for more details about her intel, but before he could get an answer, he noticed that she had already disappeared. A few minutes later, the two successfully infiltrated the fortress. Though it appeared abandoned at first, they eventually uncovered a hidden entrance. Trusting her lead, Ari worked to unlock the passage, and as the door creaked open, they discovered a dark underground pathway. Wasting no time, they began their descent. However, the deeper they went, the stronger the foul stench of beasts became. Eventually, they spotted 2 guards stationed in front of a heavily secured door. Ari, eager to take one of them down, was just about to make her move when Panta, ever the helpful companion, stepped forward with an idea. The fox was more than willing to provide a distraction. Before they even had time to react, Ari knocked out one of the guards while Ark sent the other straight to Dreamland. With the area secure, Ari moved to push the door open, but it refused to budge. Meanwhile, Ark casually slid it open with ease, making her glare at him. As soon as the door swung open, a putrid stench flooded their senses, a clear sign that many slaves had perished within these walls. But before they could dwell on the horror, Ari spotted a tuft of animal fur, and they quickly realized that Panta had already located the exit. Following the fox's lead, they emerged into a cavern, but Ark's sharp nose picked up the scent of blood. That was when a familiar presence slithered into view. Fumba had arrived. The wailing cries of his monstrous pets had dragged him from his slumber, and as his gaze settled on the intruders, he squinted, trying to place them. Unbothered, he muttered about needing to feed his most prized beast. But the moment his eyes landed on Ari's massive assets, his entire demeanor shifted. Immediately, He declared that she belonged to him and issued his command. She was to eliminate Ark on the spot. Ark barely had time to register the absurdity of the situation before Ari lunged at him with her sword. Staring in pure disbelief, he dodged and tried to reason with her, insisting that she was attacking the wrong person. But Fumba, completely ignoring his pleas, waved a hand dismissively and told him to shut up and die already. Realizing something was horribly wrong, Ark demanded to know what Fumba had done to her. But instead of answering, the scumbag simply smirked. Ari took that as her cue, slamming Ark onto the ground with a brutal strike. As her hood slipped back, Fumba's breath hitched at the sight of her pointed ears and dark complexion. The realization that she was a dark elf nearly made him combust on the spot. Eyes gleaming with sick pleasure, he urged Ari to finish Ark off. Ark, meanwhile, was quickly piecing things together. Something had bewitched her. Left with no other option, he began casting an uncursing spell. Even so, Ari kept up her relentless assault, her strikes sharp and precise. But Ark quickly noticed that even as his spell took effect, the enchantment remained unbroken. That was when he saw her eyes, blank, empty, void of all emotion. While her body attacked in reality, Ari's mind had been transported elsewhere, to a realm where her sister, Even, awaited her. Coldly, Even informed her that it was time for training. She wasted no time in criticizing Ari's weakness, claiming that she couldn't protect anyone while she was still so pathetic. To Even, weakness itself was evil. If Ari truly wanted to defend her fellow elves from worthless humans, she needed to become stronger, no matter what. To prove her resolve, Even ordered Ari to draw her sword and demonstrate her strength. Without hesitation, Ari charged at her. At the same time, in the real world, Ari continued her vicious assault against Arkansas. Despite his relentless efforts to dispel the curse, she refused to back down, eventually sweeping his legs out from under him. Ark, however, had started to notice something crucial. The uncursing spell was working, but Fumba wasn't the one casting any magic. As Ari pressed forward, Ark's sharp eyes finally caught it, something glowing beneath her hood. Realizing that that was the true culprit, he wasted no time barking a command to Panta. Take it down. As the imp struggled in Panta's grasp, Ark wasted no time incinerating the vile creature with a fire spell. Just as he did, he managed to catch Ari before she collapsed. Meanwhile, Fumba, now seething, demanded to know why Ark had dared to kill his precious pet. That was when Ark pieced it all together. The creature had been an imp, cleverly hiding in Ari's blind spot while weaving a powerful illusion over her. Fumba, rather than being upset for long, simply chuckled and commended Ark for his keen perception. Taking a dramatic step forward, he finally introduced himself as Rasen Bane, the so-called monster sorcerer. With a twisted grin, he boasted that he could control any creature, bending thousands to his will with ease. But Ark wasn't impressed. His sharp gaze fell to the curse ring tattooed onto Fumba's arm, immediately recognizing it as the mark of his dominion over the beasts. Unfazed, Fumba activated the curse, summoning a monstrous tiger and announcing that Ark was about to become dinner. Ignoring the idiot, Ark carefully set Ari to the side before turning his attention back to the enemy. He had already drawn his conclusions. Fumba had to be responsible for capturing the young elves. With a dangerous glare, Ark demanded to know their whereabouts. Fumba, clearly relishing the moment, casually admitted that they were long dead. He went on to explain that the Empire had used most of them in horrific magical experiments. The few survivors? He had slaughtered them himself. The instant those disgusting words left his mouth, Ark's patience snapped. His blade moved faster than anyone could register, and the massive tiger was reduced to nothing in a single strike. Fueled by rage, Ark spat that Fumba was the most revolting, wretched waste of existence he had ever laid eyes on. His fury had reached its peak, but Fumba simply smirked, cracking his whip against the stone floor. From the darkness, an army of monstrous beasts emerged, ready to tear Ark apart. Ark wasted no time diving into battle, cutting down the creatures with ruthless efficiency. Yet, with each slain monster, Fumba continued to lash the floor, summoning even more abominations into the fray. Suddenly, an orc charged at Ark, only to be brutally bashed into a pillar by his shield. Before he could catch his breath, a lizard attempted to coil around him, but he swiftly ended it with a single slash. Watching the carnage unfold, Fumba muttered that Ark must be some kind of minotaur in human form. Then, Ark's instinct screamed at him. Ari was in danger. But before he could react...
Arion, move!
A powerful water spell engulfed the attacking beast, sealing it inside a watery prison. Within moments, it was obliterated. Chiam had arrived. She let out a breath, relieved that she had made it in time. But as Fumba prepared to whip the floor once more, he called forth the rest of his creatures. Chiam coldly informed him that his plans were already ruined. Her clansmen had wiped out every single one of his remaining monsters in the area. With no pawns left to fight for him, Fumba was weaker than a frayed rope. But rather than accept his loss, he exploded in anger at the destruction of his beloved creatures. Meanwhile, Ark turned to Chiam, questioning how she had found them. She calmly explained that she had relayed critical intel to Ari earlier and had promised to meet up when the time was right. Before anyone could say another word, the entire cavern trembled violently. Fumba's lips curled into a wicked smile. His strongest beast had awakened. Without Chiam instructed Ark to get Ari to safety, he wasted no time teleporting outside. The moment they reappeared, thick smoke billowed from the fortress, cloaking the entire area in darkness. Ark's sharp eyes quickly scanned the scene, and in no time, he realized the horrifying truth. The monster had insane regenerative abilities and a built-in resistance to water magic. It was a damn Hydra. As they stared at the monstrosity from a distance, Chiam's face darkened with recognition. She identified the beast as the infamous Ruiner of Nations, a creature so destructive that entire civilizations had fallen before its wrath. But something was off. That was when they noticed it. Curse rings embedded all over its body. They needed a plan. Fast. Chiam suggested they retreat first to figure things out. But before they could so much as blink, one of the Hydra's heads snapped in their direction. With a terrifying roar, it unleashed a devastating Hydra's breath attack upon them. A cataclysmic explosion followed. Watching from a safe distance, Fumba grinned like an idiot, fully convinced that his enemies had been completely obliterated. Excitement surged through him. It was finally time to reveal his full power. His mind drifted back 5 years ago, back when he had once stood before the elders of his clan, demanding the respect he believed he deserved. But the clan leader had dismissed him with scorn. He had called Fumba weak, claiming he was so pathetic that all he could do was chase superficial strength. The words had cut deep, but instead of learning from them, Fumba had stewed in bitterness and resentment. Determined to prove them all wrong, he had allied himself with the Emperor. Not that the Emperor had given a damn about him, either. That single moment had sent Fumba down a spiral of obsession. He had dedicated himself to taming every monster he came across, convinced that absolute domination over beasts would finally make him unstoppable. And now, with the Hydra under his control, he believed that no one could ever look down on him again. Meanwhile, far from the explosion site, Ark and Chiam suddenly reappeared atop a mountain. Chiam stared at him in disbelief. How the hell had they survived? Ark, on the other hand, was just relieved that his shield had activated in time. His abilities left Chiam bewildered. Who the hell was this guy, really? But Ark just smirked. That was when he realized something was wrong. Ari was missing. Panic creeping into his voice, he called out for her, scanning the area desperately, until they finally spotted her. But something was different. A dark, ominous aura radiated from her body. Without a hint of emotion, she informed them that she had been conscious the entire time. Even when trapped under layers of illusions that had paralyzed her body, she had heard every single disgusting word that piece of trash Fumba had uttered. And now, she wanted payback. She demanded they hunt him down and make him suffer for his sins. Chiam didn't hesitate. She agreed completely, pointing out that as long as Fumba controlled the Hydra, he was a catastrophic threat that couldn't be ignored. Ari was already moving to take action, but Ark hesitated. How the hell were they supposed to take down a Hydra? Against a beast like that, weren't they completely useless? Chiam didn't sugarcoat it. She explained that the monster had its reputation for a reason. It wasn't just a powerful beast, it was a force of nature itself. Ark wasn't buying it. He refused to believe the Hydra was truly invincible. With unwavering confidence, he declared that the beast could be slain, and he vowed to be the one to do it. Meanwhile, in the royal empire, a messenger knelt before the emperor, delivering his report. The Hydra had reached its full size, and soon, it would be ready to fulfill its intended purpose. The emperor received the news with satisfaction. However, the messenger had more to say. He revealed that the cursed rings, which had been forged through Fumba's sorcery, were nearly complete. Yet, despite their progress, they still required Fumba's presence. He was the only one capable of controlling the Hydra. Still, the Emperor made it clear, he alone would determine Fumba's fate. Back at the battlefield, the Hydra was still advancing toward the town. A group of soldiers watched in horror, one of them voicing the question on everyone's mind. What the hell is that thing? Another soldier's response was grim. They had no time for questions. they needed to prepare for battle. However, their commander had different priorities. He immediately ordered the evacuation of all citizens to the northern sector of the city. At that moment, Ark struck. With a devastating wyvern slash, he aimed for one of the Hydra's heads, nearly blowing its mouth apart. But when the dust settled, not a scratch. Realizing how futile that attack had been, he swiftly dodged an incoming strike before retaliating with a powerful shield bash. Without hesitation, he followed up with a crushing armor lariat, knocking another serpent down, its head now mangled and useless. From a safe distance, Fumba stared in disbelief. How the hell was Ark still alive? Something about this guy was seriously messed up. The 3 remaining heads retaliated, unleashing another devastating Hydra's breath attack. With a well-timed dimension move, he teleported to safety. Just as he reappeared, another head lunged at him, its fangs closing around his body. Seizing the moment, the Hydra heads unleashed another breath attack, desperate to incinerate him. But Ark wasn't going down that easily. With an incredible feat of power, he deflected the blast, redirecting it straight across the forest.
Oopsies.
As the Hydra prepared to unleash
From the top-tier class, Sacred Knight. Combat skill, Judgment!
another attack, Ark knew he needed to go beyond his limits. The creature's regeneration was too powerful. His current abilities weren't enough to put it down. He realized he had no choice but to use a forbidden technique. Though he knew he couldn't maintain it for long, he decided to activate the spell anyway.
Time! Shouldn't take longer than 5 minutes! I call upon you,
Summoning the infernal demon Ifrit. He confronted the Hydra, fully aware that this was his chance to end it once and for all. All the while, Ari and Kayum were sprinting through the forest, but when Panda suddenly sensed Fumba's presence, they immediately changed course, following his trail. At the same time, Ark braced himself for the battle that would decide the fate of the town. Fumba couldn't comprehend how Ark had managed to summon such a monstrous abomination. But as he attempted to exert control over the Hydra, he was nearly scorched by Ari's flames. Suddenly, they appeared before his eyes, standing in his way. Ari didn't waste any words. She told him they had come to kill him. Fumba scoffed at her, thinking she was getting far too full of herself. He reminded them that they were nothing compared to his beast, but Ari didn't deny the Hydra's power. Instead, she pointed out that its strength wasn't his. It never was. She told him that no matter how much he tried to seize control of something greater than himself, he would always be weak. His very attempt to dominate the Hydra was proof of it. Her words cut deep, dragging up memories of the clan leader and the Emperor calling him weak. Their voices echoed in his mind, fueling his rage. Gritting his teeth, Fumba snarled at Ari, telling her she was really starting to piss him off. He brandished his whip, vowing to crush them until they finally admitted how powerful he was. With a sharp crack, he lashed out, but Ari nimbly evaded the attack. In one fluid motion, she swung her blade, effortlessly slicing through 3 imps at once. She called him a pathetic loser, someone so weak that she would never fall for his cheap tricks again. Fumba, seething with fury, attempted to command the Hydra to destroy her. But before he could, Chiyam appeared behind him, slashing across his back. The cursed markings on his body were ruined in an instant, severing his connection to the monsters. Chiyam smirked, knowing full well that without them, he had lost control. But Fumba only laughed through the pain. He revealed that without his command, the Hydra had become unstoppable. It would devour the entire town. Ari, however, wasn't worried in the slightest. She was certain that Ark would obliterate the creature. Channeling the fire within her blade, she prepared to rid the world of Fumba's worthless existence. With one decisive strike, her flames consumed his whip entirely. Desperate to save his own hide, Fumba scrambled to make excuses. He claimed he had only been following the Emperor's orders, but Ari had no interest in his cowardly pleas. She told him to rot in hell, raising her sword.
Can we talk?
You're finished. Come fire, heed my call, consume all to ash!
She unleashed a raging inferno, engulfing his body in flames and reducing him to nothing but ashes. At that same moment, the infernal demon launched itself at the Hydra, tearing off 2 of its massive serpentine heads. As one of the remaining heads shrieked in defiance, the demon silenced it with a thunderous punch, sending it hurtling backward. The Hydra, realizing it was outmatched, tried to flee, but Ark wasn't about to let it escape. Grabbing its massive tail, he swung the creature high into the sky, giving the demon the perfect opening to unleash its devastating flame hellion. The firestorm consumed the Hydra entirely, erasing it from existence. With the battle over, Ark turned his attention back to Ari and Kayam, making his way toward them. Ari, still reeling from what she had just witnessed, couldn't help but ask what in the hell that demon was. Ark explained that it was a being he had summoned from another dimension, but assured her that it would vanish in a matter of minutes. Just as he finished speaking, a whispering fowl appeared, its presence signaling that the fight was far from over. As Ari suspected the whispering fowl had been sent by Danka, the bird began delivering its message. It reported that the second princess, Uriarn, had met with one of the great elven elders, Fangas. During their discussion, Uriana made a solemn vow to take full responsibility for locating their missing elves. Fangas, intrigued by her determination, agreed to her proposal, but wasted no time in asking what she expected in return. Uriana explained that her brothers had already secured the support of both the Great Ravlan Empire and the Holy Ravlan Empire. Given that both Eastern and Western Ravlan shared a long history of enslaving elves, Fangas acknowledged that her reasoning was sound. In exchange for their allegiance, Uriana pledged to safeguard their lands from any form of invasion. Recognizing that he could not hope for a better offer, Fangas formally accepted once again. As Uriana reflected on how the dream of coexistence was drawing closer, Fangas reassured her that they would one day be great neighbors, and with that, they sealed their agreement with a handshake. Meanwhile, Ark, Ari, and Chiam were making their way through the forest. Ark quickly noticed that Ari seemed troubled and asked if she was preoccupied with Danka's message. She admitted that she was, but tried to comfort herself with the thought that her relentless search for the missing elves might finally come to an end. However, she confessed that she was surprised to see humans taking up the responsibility instead. She recalled how Karsi had once told her that elves and humans would eventually live together, an idea she had previously dismissed as impossible. But as Ark pointed out, the time for that future might be closer than she had ever imagined. Inside the Emperor's castle, the messenger informed him of Fumba's and the Hydra's deaths. However, the Emperor remained unfazed, stating that their demise would not disrupt his plans. He confirmed that the cursed rings were already in use, but was left wondering who could have been powerful enough to slay the Hydra. Back in the forest, Ark, Ari, and Chiyomi continued their journey. As Ark casually remarked that he was prepared to resume his travels in peace, Ari immediately shot down the idea, saying such a thing was impossible. Ark unveiled his face, revealing the gruesome sight of his skull. Chiyomi recoiled, quickly ducking behind a tree, while Ari, seeing his enormous bone structure for the first time, was taken aback. As Ark pondered their next course of action, Ari made it clear that their destination was the Lord Crown, where they hoped to discover the spring that could break his skeletal curse. Hearing those words, Ark found himself reflecting once more on the mystery of his existence. Though he still had no clue how he had come into this world, he knew one thing for certain. He was grateful to be spending his time in it with his newfound companions.